Okay, so I want to make a very important clarification about this, because number one, we're calling people who die through the COVID a Shaheed. But then we're saying we have to give them Ghusl, whereas it's known that those who are the proper Shaheeds, those who are proper martyrs, they are not given Ghusl. They're actually buried in their own in their own clothing, and according to some Imams, you don't even pray on them, while Imam Abu Hanifa says you should pray on them. So one thing we have to understand is that the Shaheed who is not given a bath, a washing, and shrouding in a white shroud as such, but they're buried with their own blood and everything, are those who die in the battlefield, like a proper battlefield. Now I know this seems like a battlefield, but this is not the battlefield that is mentioned. It's the battlefield of a war, like a physical war of some sort. So those guys are considered, those people are considered Shaheed of this world and the hereafter. Right, because they died in a very particular circumstance. Now, that is the ideal that is now being referenced in the hadith literature, right? That is the model that's been referenced, and other statements are being made in the Sunnah in relationship to this. Because people knew now what it was to die in the path of Allah in a battle. Huge reward. So now the Prophet ﷺ, to give a lot of optimism and good hope to a lot of other people who died in unnatural circumstances, like the plague, right? Like the plague, for example, or through pregnancy, or through being crushed in an accident, for example. Most unnatural causes, there's about up to 70 such categories of people mentioned with reference to the Shaheed of this world, which is the one who dies in battle, who's not given a bath. But these people are given a bath. They have to be shrouded properly, and then they have to be buried. You do the janazah prayer on them, but from the akhirah they will rise on the day of judgment like the other Shaheed. But there's a different categorization. It's like saying that if you do ishraq prayer in the morning after sunrise, you will get the reward of a umrah. Clearly the reward of a umrah has its own place in relationship to that, relative to that, and saying you'll get the base reward of that at least. Whereas when you go Umrah, there's be multiplication of reward above that as well, including the Umrah. So don't misunderstand this. We're getting a lot of calls and comments online that why are you even bothering bathing the deceased in a COVID situation? That if they're Shaheed, then they shouldn't be buried. So people are misunderstanding that and kind of cross-referencing these things in an incorrect way. These people have to be bathed because they are Shaheeds of the hereafter, just like a pregnant woman who dies during giving birth or in pregnancy, right? And likewise, and so on. So even though the hadith says at-ta'un, the one who's in a ta'un, a plague, is a Shaheed, right? And many people are using this hadith to. So I got a question today that if people are using this hadith to say people in this pandemic, which is not a proper plague, they're using this hadith to say the people are Shaheed in this Shaheed according to this hadith, then this causes a bit of confusion, because the Prophet ﷺ said that the ta'un, the plague in particular, will never enter Makkah, Mukarramah, Madinah Munawwara, whereas this one has, because this is not a plague, then we say. So how do you reconcile that idea that if this is a plague, it can't enter Madinah Munawwara, so this is not a plague, but then we're using the same hadith to say people who are in this same, afflicted by this same pandemic, the virus, right, are Shaheed by the virtue of the hadith. So that's not to be taken literally. They're saying that just like, the real meaning of this is that just like people in a plague are a Shaheed, and because they're dying of this kind of unnatural cause, while this is not a plague, but we're hoping, because you can only hope for these things. There's no guarantee about who's a Shaheed in the path of Allah anyway. Right? There's no guarantee. The only thing we're guaranteed that if somebody dies fighting in the path of Allah, the only guaranteed thing is that you have to deal with him in a different way, because that's a physical aspect. But whether he's accepted or not is up to Allah. Whether all of his efforts and dying in the path was even accepted, Allah knows best. If some of these crazy people who do crazy things and they think themselves a Shaheed, they may not be Shaheed in the sight of Allah because they've done a crazy thing. They are not a Shaheed, in fact. So likewise here, only Allah knows best who's a Shaheed. This is what optimism that Allah has told us to have, that hopefully they're Shaheed. So it's not that they're Shaheed because they're in a plague, but because they're in a illness, right? And there's numerous other, I only got this question this morning. I've not had a chance to look up the 70 categories and see which other categories that COVID patients may fall into. And again, that's also going to be based on their sabr and patience. Somebody who dies in this complaining about Allah and miserable and feeling abused and oppressed, they're not going to get the shaheed, because shaheed, being a shaheed, requires a certain hope in Allah. A certain hope in Allah. Then that person is considered the martyr. So there's quite a few separate different ideas here that need to be understood well. So please stop saying that these people are that shaheed which is not bathed. These people do have to be bathed as long as we can bathe them, as long as and according to the way the law, the way the health professionals are guiding us to do that.